We all like football. It's the sport our hearts most desire. For some of us, it's a hobby. For others, it's a job. But the thing that unites us all is the elegance of the game, especially the quick interchanges, the incredible passes, and that unique style of play called tiki-taka. What if I told you that this exists only because of one tremendous footballer? He invented total football, and he is responsible for one of the most incredible changes in football. His name is Johan Cruyff, a legend of the game, one who will forever stay with us even though he's not here physically anymore. So let's look at how everything started. Johan Cruyff was born in East Amsterdam in 1947, a working-class district of a city damaged by war. He joined the youth system at Ajax when he was 10 and quickly showed exceptional talent. He also loved his father very much, who liked football a lot, and he inspired him into starting his career. Unfortunately, in 1959, Cruyff's father died from a heart attack. His father's death had a major impact on his mentality. As Cruyff recalled in celebration of his 50th birthday, "My father died when I was just 12 and he was 45. From that day, the feeling crept stronger over me that I would die at the same age. And when I had serious heart problems when I reached 45, I thought, this is it. Only medical science, which was not available to help my father, kept me alive." This part is very important as his football career was like a tribute for his dad, to show him that Cruyff was worth something and that one day he would become a great footballer. Also, his mother started working at Ajax as a cleaner, deciding that she could no longer carry on at the grocer without her husband. This also motivated Cruyff a lot. He even became nearly obsessed with financial security, so his mother wouldn't suffer any day longer. When he first joined Ajax, he preferred baseball and continued to play the sport until he was 15, as his coaches told him to focus only on football. Cruyff made his first team debut on 15 November 1964 in the Eredivisie against GVAV, scoring the only goal for Ajax in a 3-1 defeat. That year, Ajax finished in their lowest position since the establishment of professional football, in 13th, so they desperately needed a new player who would dominate everyone and just be the best for that team. And that player was none other than Johan Cruyff. Cruyff really started to make an impression in the 1965-1966 season and established himself as a regular first-team player after scoring 2 goals against DWS in the Olympic Stadium. In that season, he scored 25 goals in 23 games, and thanks to him, Ajax won the championship. Also, keep in mind that he did this while he was 18 years old. Imagine debuting for your club at 18 years of age and in the same season winning the championship and at the same time being the key player. This is what Johan Cruyff did. In the next season, in 1966-1967, Ajax again won the championship and the cup. It was Cruyff's first double, but what's more impressive is that he scored 33 goals and he was the leading goal scorer in the Eredivisie at just 19 years of age. In the 1967-1968 season, he won the league for a 3rd time in a row, and he was named the Dutch Footballer of the Year for the 2nd consecutive time. In the 1970-1971 season, he suffered a groin injury and made his comeback on 30 October 1970 against PSV. But then, something strange happened. Instead of wearing his usual number 9, which was in use by Gary Mjugren, he chose the number 14, which was very unusual for those times, as starters used the number from 1 to 11. The number 14 then went on to become iconic, because it was so unique and only Cruyff wore it as a starter. After winning the cup final against Sparta Rotterdam by a score of 2-1, Ajax won in Europe for the first time. On 2nd of June 1971, in London, Ajax won the European Cup by defeating Panathinaikos 2-0. This is where his football revolution started. When he came in at Ajax, they finished in their lowest position since the club was even founded. In just a few years, he brought them European glory all by himself. Because of his performances and contribution to the club, he signed a 7-year contract at Ajax. At the end of the season, he was named the Dutch Player of the Year and the European Footballer of the Year. And remember when I told you about his football revolution? In 1972, Ajax won again the European Cup, and they beat Inter Milan 2-0 in the final. Cruyff scored both goals. What's revolutionary about this game is that a new style of football was announced to the world: total football. This was also the end of the Italian style of defensive football, which proved to not be efficient at all against Johan Cruyff. The way he controlled the ball, dribbled, and gave away passes was completely new for the football world at those times. Nobody saw anyone like this player before. In the same season, in the league, Cruyff was the top scorer with 25 goals as Ajax became champions. Ajax won the Intercontinental Cup, beating Argentina's Independiente 1-1 in the first game, followed by a 3-0. And then in January 1973, they won the European Super Cup by beating Rangers. Those games established Cruyff as the new best European footballer and just the new footballer nobody has seen before. And when you think about those two factors, what's the best place you can transfer to? Barcelona, of course. In 1973, Cruyff was sold to Barcelona for $2 million, which at that time was a transfer record. And he, of course, brought his unique style of play to Spain. He was so in love with Barcelona that he even gave his son a Catalan name, Jordi Cruyff, who is now the sporting director at Barcelona, but he will leave at the end of the season. Returning to our story, Cruyff was already special from his first season. He helped the club win their first La Liga title since 1960. Not only that, but they defeated their biggest rivals Real Madrid 5-0 at Santiago Bernabeu, a trend that continues until this very day. This title united the Barcelona fans who went out on the street to celebrate the victory. Many people said that he has done more for the country in 90 minutes than some politicians in years of struggle. He was a true leader. With Cruyff, you never felt like losing. He had everything: speed, power, and athleticism. So it was inevitable that in 1974 he was once again named the European Footballer of the Year. Also, during his time in Barcelona, he scored a legendary goal against Atletico Madrid. He jumped into the air and scored with his right heel against Miguel Reina. That goal was dubbed as the Impossible Cruyff goal, which until this day, people are trying to recreate. After his time with Barca, he decided to retire in 1978. But he lost a lot of money from poor investments, including a pig farm that was cancelled by a scam artist. He started playing again in the United States and said that he made a big mistake by retiring at the age of 31. With the unique talent he possessed. So his career began once again, this time far away from Europe. But of course, a player of his caliber, even at that age, couldn't accept playing for a league in the USA. He needed bigger challenges. So he returned in the end in Europe. The club he chose was Levante from Spanish Segunda División. On 1st of March 1981, he made his debut for them, but injuries and the fail to secure promotion to La Liga ensured that his contract with Levante fell through. So, in June 1981, he returned to the US and he played there for Washington Diplomats. After his short spell in the US, he returned to Ajax in December 1981 to make history once again. In the 1981, 1982 and 1982-1983 seasons, Ajax along with Cruyff became league champions. In 1982-1983, Ajax won the Dutch Cup. So he didn't disappoint. Cruyff and Ajax were always going to be a perfect match. Though he only won 2 domestic titles, his influence on this team was unreal. Because of this, he wanted a new contract, which Ajax didn't give to him. This enraged Cruyff and he signed with their bitter rivals, Feyenoord. and once again he won the league title, which was the first Eredivisie for the club in over a decade. The team's successes was due to the performances of Cruyff along with Ruud Gullit and Peter Houtman. Despite his relatively advanced age, Cruyff played all league matches that season except for one. Because of his performance on the field, he was voted as the Dutch Footballer of the Year for the 5th time. At the end of the season, the veteran announced his final retirement. But was this the end? Of course, it wasn't. We still have to talk about his international achievements. His career with Netherlands was as impressive as his club career. He played 48 matches and scored 33 goals for his national team. Also, Netherlands never lost when Cruyff scored. In September 1966, he made his debut in the UEFA Euro 1968 qualifier against Hungary, and he scored. Accusations of Cruyff's aloofness were not rebuffed by his habit of wearing a shirt with only 2 black stripes along the sleeves, as opposed to Adidas' usual design feature of 3, worn by all the other Dutch players except Cruyff. Cruyff had a separate sponsorship deal with Puma. He also wore the number 14 jersey for the Netherlands, setting a trend of wearing shirt numbers outside the usual starting numbers from 1 to 11. In the 1974 World Cup, Cruyff with Netherlands were runners-up and he was named player of the tournament. They faced West Germany in the final, but even his total football was no match for the Germans. Then, Cruyff retired from international football in October 1977. And here his legacy takes a huge turn. He wanted to become a coach. And the football world doesn't only know him for his uniqueness as a player, but for being a revolutionary manager as well. And of course, he began his coaching career at Ajax. In the 1985-1986 and 1986-1987 seasons, Ajax won the cup. During this period, his incredible tactical system came to life. 3 defenders plus 1 more covering the space. Basically a defensive midfielder. Then 2 midfielders, 1 second striker, 2 wingers and 1 versatile center forward. These tactics were so successful that Ajax won the Champions League in 1995, playing under this system. This title was proof that his revolutionary tactics actually worked. And not only did they work, but his team dominated everything. He then made history with Barcelona. He then returned to the club in the 1988-1989 season, but this time as a manager. At Barca, Cruyff completely changed everything, and one of the most important changes was implementing his attractive, attacking football style of play. But this wasn't the case only for the first main team. He also did that with Barca's youth system, which made it easier for young players to be included in the first team. When Cruyff took over, Barcelona was a club in debt and crisis. Results were bad, performances were poor, nothing was going well for them. That wasn't the case for long though, as Johan recovered the identity he embodied as a player. He took many risks, and results quickly followed. At Barca, Cruyff brought a lot of players, such as Pep Guardiola, Ronald Koeman, Gheorghe Hagi, Hristo Stoichkov, Romario, and many others. And with them and their brilliant manager, Barcelona experienced a golden era. In 5 years, Cruyff led Barca to 4 European finals, 2 European Winners' Cup finals and 2 Champions League finals. But these aren't the only achievements under Johan. Barca won 4 La Liga titles in a row and beat Sampdoria in both the 1989 European Cup Winners' Cup final and the 1992 European Cup final at Wembley Stadium. On 10th of May 1989, Barca won 2-0 against Sampdoria, so Cruyff's team took home the 3rd Cup Winners' Cup, but that wasn't the end, as on 20 May 1992 at Wembley, they won again against Sampdoria. The last thing he said to his players before they went on to play was go out there and enjoy yourselves. The match went to extra time, and in the 111th minute, Ronald Koeman's brilliant free kick brought Barca their first ever Champions League title. Over 1 million people turned out on the streets of Barcelona to celebrate the title. That's how Cruyff united an entire city. With 11 trophies, Johan Cruyff was the most successful manager in Barca's history, but he was surpassed by his student Guardiola, who won 15 titles. In his last 2 seasons, Cruyff didn't win any titles, so he was sacked, but what he left behind was more important than any title. Johan Cruyff is maybe the most important player in the history of football. He changed the way football was viewed as a sport. Before his appearance, defense was the main way of winning titles and games. But after, people learned that you can play attractive football and still win. Barcelona's identity and principles are based on Johan Cruyff's style. Not only them, but also Ajax. They are now very successful clubs. And who knows where they would be today without Johan. He unfortunately passed away in 2016, but his legacy was never forgotten, and it will never be. Johan Cruyff was just different.